Okay, so this parcel just came just now, so I think I might have mentioned that I was expecting this book. Um, but yeah, be looking for this. I did have, it's a collector's edition. I did have, I think, the majority of the series years ago when it came out, but it's now just been collected in this really nice volume, really thick volume, collects all the series. It is a Vertigo comic from about 12 years ago, 14 years ago, something like that. It might be even further than that, I can't remember correctly. But yeah, so let's have a look. Okay, so this is Flinch. So if you enjoy stuff like the recent relaunch of the EC line from Oni, and things like Hello Darkness, etc., this is like the forerunner of this. But before this, which I hope gets collected as well, was a series called Wasteland, which was weird as fuck and really, really good. But this came a little bit later, and as you can see, it features talents such as Brian Azzarello, Richard Corbin, Garth Ennis, Jim Lee, Greg Rucka, Benny Wrightson, and many more. As it says here, it collects 1 to 16. So that gives you more of a full list of who's in here. So it's a murderer's row of really talent. I mean, you've got Bill Sienkiewicz, Bruce Timm, Robert Valley, Kent Williams, who's one of my favourites, Doug Fregredo, William Mesner-Loebs, Frank Whiteley. So this is very similar. This is like a more extreme. I don't know if you remember the Alfred Hitchcock Presents series, TV series, where there'd be a real sting in the tail at the end, and that's what these are like. These are like short, sharp shocks. But let's just have a flick through. So there's 16 issues in here, so it's just shy of 400 pages. It retails for $34.99. It's definitely for mature audiences only. I love that cover. There's just something just so disturbing about where he's operating on himself. He's marked out bits that he's going to cut out, so yeah, pretty grim. So let's just have a flick through. So that gives you a table of contents. So here you've got Jim Lee. I do like this period of Jim Lee when he started experimenting with style and not doing his normal I wasn't not bland, but his normal trademark style, where just like this one, it's just pure line work. There's no cross hatching or anything like that. He lets the colours fill it in. It's got an almost Scott Collins look to it, who used to be the Flash artist. And then we have Jen Van Meter writing a story with art by Frank Whiteley. And here we've got Richard Corbin with Bruce Jones doing the writing. So as you can see already, this is just the first issue. It's got extreme top talent. And then here's Bill Sienkiewicz with Dean Motter writing. I had to chat that it was Bill Sienkiewicz because obviously he's so versatile in his art style. He's got about 100 different styles what he plays with. So again, the art and the writing doesn't let down. Pat McKeown on here, who you don't hear much of nowadays. Bob Fingerman doing the writing, who's a really solid artist in his own right. And then Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Russo, so the 100 Bullets team. So this is like a blend of it covers the whole gamut of horror to hard crime, what verges on horror. So basically anything that's extreme. And you've got Kelly Jones here, who's like the natural successor to Bernie Wrightson, and who, if you're a fan of the current Infernal Hulk artist, you'll appreciate Kelly Jones. Very similar in style. And here we have Scott Cunningham and Marcelo Furzin. I've not got my glasses on, so it's a bit fuzzy, but again, beautiful artwork. Kieran Dwyer and Garth Ennis as writer. If I remember rightly, I think if I remember my artist lore. I think Kieran Dwyer is John Byrne's stepson. But again, he's a underused artist. He kind of did quite a bit of Marvel and DC in the late 80s, early 90s, and then shifted more to indie stuff. That's a very dynamic cover. That's got to be a Dave McKean cover. Kent Williams. I didn't even need to look at the name, I just know his style. I think it's Kent Williams. Yeah, Kent Williams. Very distinct style. Who has moved now to doing just mostly being a fine artist, figure artist. And then Ty Templeton. If you've never read Stig's Inferno, I do recommend hunting it down because it was years before its time in subject matter, classic of the 80s. Paul Galassi with Bruce Jones writing. A nice black and white western. This, I guess, is what Marvel tried to do. I just need to get a drink. I'm about to cut. This is what Marvel tried to do with a series in the late 80s. I think it's the late 80s, early 90s, called Savage Tales Black and White magazine. But they didn't go hard enough. Whereas Vertigo and DC, they don't care about how hard they go. This cover is just amazing. Look at that use of the red. Fantastic. So, Rich Burkett. I don't even know this sounds grim, but I don't even know if he's still alive. I used to love his style. He ended up doing a lot of stuff for the Batman Adventures comic, but he did a lot of stuff for Eclipse and other companies like that in the 80s and 90s, but you don't see him much now, so I'm not familiar with this artist. I do like that. I think when Vertigo first launched, I think he did a 64-page like one-shot, like a biographical kind of story. Is this Mark Wheatley? Let me just check if they've got the cover. Yeah, Mark Wheatley and Mark Hempel, who did Bradley, quite a bit of Sandman stuff, and Breathtaker, which is one of my all-time favourite comics, which Tyson's done a lovely luxury edition of recently. Very distinctive in their style. Beautiful. That's got to be a Kent Williams cover. Beautiful Kent Williams cover. So Meslo's writing, Duncan Fegredo doing his very distinctive art style. Another hit person who gets underappreciated quite a bit. In fact, both of them do. Ho Chi Anderson, who's done some real pioneering series in the past. He did was it Martin? He did either. I think he did a series on Malcolm X, if I remember rightly. He did a series cut for Milestone called White Wolf, I think it was, or Wise Son, one or two. But he did a series for Milestone. But he's got this really distinctive style. He's like a curious blend of Cal Baker and Bill Sienkiewicz. Andy Parks doing the art here, and Phil Hester writing. Oh, and he does the pencils. Phil Hester, of course he did. Andy Parks does the inks. Phil Hester's one of that. He's a double talent where he's a great writer and a great artist. And again, another very disturbing cover. This is Phil Jimenez doing the artwork, and written by Devin Grayson, who got notoriety for a particular run of Nightwing, which we don't talk about. But Phil Jimenez did amazing artwork with Wonder Woman and Invisibles, and great work here as well. So that looks like a more pure horror story. And there's this one. To be honest, Jim Woodring, who normally does art and does the scripts. Randy Burke does the artwork. Bill Wellingham does art historian here of Elementals and Fables fame. And then we've got Greg Rucka and James Romberger doing the artwork. This one's called Guts. This looks quite disturbing. So this goes further than the Oni EC books do, because it is directly aimed at adults only. They can push the envelope quite a bit more. And then we've got Robert Rodey writing, Marcel Fusin on artwork. If I remember rightly, Robert Rodey did a Vertigo series about gay secret agents a number of years ago. I don't know these useless facts. And another amazing artist, John J. Muth, does the writing on the artwork on here. John Hiramoto does the writing. Never heard of that writer before, but John J. Muth is another goat, just amazing. And then completely different in style and vibe of this story. This is written by Bruce Jones. Has written quite a few stories on here. Art by Dave Taylor, who sadly passed away recently from cancer, and he's currently, you can see his work in Judge Dredd magazine at the moment, doing his, where they're showing his very final strip. But he's got a gorgeous style. I think he worked for Mobius for a bit, and that's how his style develops in this more European style. Then Sean Phillips, with a very different style to what he normally does, written by Tom Metzger. Pardon me again. There's Stephen T. Seagal, who you don't really see much in comics nowadays, and Jim Estes doing the artwork. Not an artist I'm familiar with. But as you can see, no, there's not any dipping quality with the writers or the stories. Unlike, I don't want to be bashing EC, but this is what EC should have done, where they should have kept the creme de la creme of artists and writers, and not just where they have some really good writers and artists and then pad it out with mediocre ones, which is what made me stop the series, unfortunately. This is consistently of a high quality. I mean, Brian Azzarello again, Daniel Zizous, who did a distillery series with Brian Azzarello and Stephanie Phillips recently called Life. Very distinctive in his art style. Frank Terran, who did two or three issues of The Punisher, and then he disappeared for a bit. But again, very distinctive. Ken Rothenstein doing the writing, not particularly very familiar with that writer. And then, of course, very distinctive David Lloyd of V for Vendetta fame, with Tony Bedard doing the writing, and he also created Night Raven. I don't know if he created Night Raven, but did a big chunk of Night Raven, which, if you can ever find a copy, do hunt it out. It's more of a UK comic. Oh, I love David Lloyd's use of blacks. And again, another creepy cover. And Bruce Timm, can't mistake his art style. And Joe Lansdale, who's one of my favourite fiction writers. I've read loads of his books. Must be about 25, 30 books of his I've read. But I never expected these two to team up. But again, just looks amazing. John Rosen, who did quite a bit of work for Milestone, did a character called Zombie with an X at the beginning, and another one called Cobalt, with Cliff Chang, he used to call himself Wu Chang then, on the art. Didn't he do Catwoman recently? And this one is, I don't know. This one's strange. Very strange. We won't dwell on that, but it's by Dave Taylor again. Again, Dave Taylor's art just changes with each comic he does. He was so versatile, and it's written by Ian Carney, whose name I've heard of but not too familiar with. And then we have Bruce Jones again. It looks like he's going to I kind of like that. It's kind of like, because Bruce Jones did loads of eerie and creepy strips back in the 60s and 70s and the early 80s. So it's nice that he kind of like brought someone to do a big chunk of these stories. He's kind of like the backbone of this series by the looks of it, writing wise. And it's got art is by Frank Whiteley. I thought this was Peter Snowsberg then, because the ink in there looks very much like Peter Snowsberg, who did Books of Magic, and he's currently doing Hornsby and Halo. But no, it's Frank Whiteley. Again, ever evolving styles. This is more your classic Frank Whiteley. And we have Ryan Sook doing the arts, and John Arcudi, who's another writer who's very underappreciated, such a talent. Oh, Ryan Sook's artwork is just gorgeous. For me, he's like the natural inheritor for Kevin Nolan. Then Scott Cunningham doing art and story. He's got very much a Richard Corbin kind of look to his art style. I do like the look of that. Another great cover. And Joe Lansdale returns with his old collaborator art from the Jonah Hex Vertigo series, Tim Truman, of Scouts fame as well, and he also did quite a big chunk of Grimjack. Tim Truman did, I mean. That's going to be wonderful. Then Roger Langridge, who's recently got a new level of popularity with a new Muppets Noir comic from Dynamite, so do check that out. I'm going to trade weight for it because I can't buy everything. And then this other story here called The Shaft by Javier Pulido and Brian Azzarello. So Javier Pulido, I think isn't he the artist on Absolute Martian Manhunter? But yeah, another grim story there. So Bruce Jones back again with Bernie Wrightson. Ooh, Geeko Hog, you need to get this book. This is a great collection of artists and writers. Definitely up your style. But some late Bernie Wrightson. But this is Bernie Wrightson. He went through a period like with the Cults where his inks and pencil lines got very loose, but it looks like he's tightened up with this story. This is more like your old school horror Bernie Wrightson, where there's a lot of heavy blacks, and just like on here, he's almost gone Gil Kane on this panel here. Wonderful, wonderful, gorgeous artwork. And then one of my favourite artists, Ted McKeever. I adore his art style. He's one of those artists you either absolutely love and adore, or you just don't get. He's very Marmite. And he did the writing as well, which is what he normally does. Nearly finished now. And then we have Darko Markin, Tim Levins on art. Another artist I'm not familiar with. Very much almost like a Bruce Timm style to his art style. And then Paul Jenkins writing, and the Panda Bros, who did a really fun run on Grendel in the early days of when it was released. They're very distinctive in that art style. I tried to draw like them back in the day. And I knew this straight away. If you've read a Vertigo Comic Code 2000 AD issue, you come across Chris Weston, and he did a Dark Horse comic recently with Gerard Way. So Chris Weston on the art here. He's wonderful. I think he is like the modern day Brian Bolland. He's just a bit of boobage there. And then we've got Will Pfeiffer and Robert Valley on art here for this one. And it looks like this is the final issue. And on here we've got Mike Carey writing, Craig Hamilton, who did a really nice Aquaman series back in the 80s. Very distinctive. And I think he also did if I can remember rightly, I think he might have done an Oz series of graphic novels. But beautiful artist, very distinctive artist. Whoa. Okay, and then we have Philip Bond, who came to prominence in the late 80s, early 90s in Deadline magazine with a strip called Wired World, and then he did loads of Vertigo stuff as well, with Charlie Bolton doing the writing. I'm not familiar with the writer, but Philip Bond's very distinctive in his style. If you like Jamie Hewlett, you'll enjoy his art style. They both kind of like came up together. And then Guy Gonzalez writing and Daniel Chazos, I'm butchering his name, on the final story. We'll skip over that because it's quite rude. Not only back matter, but like I said, you get just shy of 400 pages, $34.99, and it's FLINCH, collects all 16 issues. So if you want a good anthology with like the creme de la creme of artists and writers, you can't go wrong with this. So hope you enjoy that. I will be doing another video later today where it'll be a big review of a whole series, what I'm hoping to finish in the next few hours. Okay, bye.